You are listening to the Bat Flip Podcast, a baseball podcast from Belly Up Sports and the Belly Up Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Damian and Matt.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Bat Flip Podcast. My name is Damian here with my co-host, Matt, coming to you on May 10th of 2022. Got a announcement between MLB and London this week. We have some couple people getting injured, a key player getting optioned, and then some bigger games that we wanted to touch on that happened from this last week, individually wise and some team wise big comebacks. And then we'll jump into our players of the week at the end, like always. But before we get into all of that, how are you doing, Matt?
Doing great. Just had a pretty good week and just ready to get to talking about a little bit of baseball. So
Yeah, well, we'll jump right in with this MLB and London long-term partnership that was announced just yesterday, actually, as we're recording this. But MLB and London announced that over the next 5 years, some major events will be held in London, trying to help grow the game. And that includes regular season games in 2023, 2024, and 2026.
yeah, this is a really cool thing to have happen. I've been a big proponent of Major League Baseball branching out and being the leader for worldwide baseball. I think that there's been times where Major League Baseball hasn't done a great job of this. Stuff like, last year they could have taken an Olympic break and let Major League players play in the Olympics. They didn't do that. That would have grown the game worldwide. And this is a game that obviously is already a international game. You have obviously, in Asia, East Asia, it's just such a huge deal in Korea, Japan, Taiwan. It's a big thing. It's gotten kind of popular in Australia too. You see some big leaguers coming out of Australia now. I mean, Liam Hendriks, one of the best closers in the game from Australia. Obviously, Central America and the Caribbean, it's big, and North America, of course. But one of the last big place that hadn't really reached is obviously Africa and Europe. And of course, Europe being an enormous sports continent, and it's such a big part of the culture there, with other sports, that you would like to see baseball try to branch out a little bit better, get that market into Europe. And I think this is a great opportunity to do so. I think that the NFL has had a lot of success branching out to London, and because football is a great product, and it's something that just branching out there. I mean, they've started to really like that over in Europe. You talk about the NBA is becoming more popular over there, and baseball is something that go play games there, go do some of these events there, grow the sport over there. It'll help in the long run, because I truly do think that baseball can be an international sport on all levels, not just on kind of regional, or on a regional level where it's like the Americas and then East Asia. Like, I think that Europe, if Americas and East Asia love it, then I think Europe would love it, and I think eventually one day Africa would love it too. But it's just one of those things, you just got to get to that point. So um, I definitely am think this is a big deal for the game, and I love that. I love that they're doing it, branching out. I hope that they'll continue to do this and do it in more locations over there. That the NFL kind of moved to, or doing a game in Munich this year, so in Germany. So it'd be cool for MLB, if this goes well in London, to maybe do one in Paris, or in Germany or Italy or something. Obviously they've done one in London before, but definitely a cool event.
Yeah, you mentioned it right there at the end. It's not going to be their first trip into London. They did have the London series in 2019 with the Red Sox and the Yankees, having a 2-game series there, and it drew a really well crowd. Each game was over 60,000 fans, and it was a big offensive environment. There was 50 runs scored within that, so I wonder if they're looking at maybe trying to figure out a different style of a ballpark, or if they like that way. But it is very cool to see that they're branching out that way. And you said it's been kind of stuck to the Americas and the East Asias, and it is cool to see it branching overseas to the Europe area because we've seen the NFL, we've seen the NBA have this success, and them really accept the sport and become fans of the sport. You see a lot of a lot of NFL fans from overseas. Um, so it is really cool. Now, one of the other events that they have mentioned is kind of in this. It was announced before, but other events like this are kind of what we're talking about when they say over the next 5 years. But there's going to be a home run derby X that's going to take place in London's Crystal Palace Park on July 9th of 2022. It's basically a competition between four franchises. The ones represented here are the Red Sox, the Yankees, the Dodgers, and the Cubs. It'll have a former player, like a softball or women's baseball star, so they call it a superstar there. A region's local development system, so a rookie from around there, and then a influential content creator, wild card, is what they're calling that. And then they're going to do the same event in Seoul on September 17th, and then Mexico City on October 15th. So it's the London thing's the kind of start to this, but you already see with this event that they're branching out to some other places, and that's just going to help the game grow even more. And maybe we see in the future, if this London series works out and this Home Run Derby X is a success, that you see other events branching out to farther places in the world rather than just in the Mexicos and then even over to Europe.
Yeah, definitely true. And one other thing too is I would hope that Major League Baseball would obviously, we've got the minor leagues in the Americas that are in the U.S. that feeds into the big league clubs, but it would be cool if Major League Baseball would develop some kind of partnership with some of the independent international leagues in Europe, because they are there. They're just not very popular yet, and kind of help them grow too. That might be another step toward you could end up seeing something similar to the KBO or the Japanese league, and where you end up with a place where you might even get some major league players come from there. So, kind of growing that sport at the grassroots level is going to be a big deal. But definitely like the idea. I mean, just having fun events and having baseball be a part of that fun event. It doesn't even have to be a baseball game of major league teams. Like you say, these home run derbies, that's a cool event. But I'm definitely excited to see what this brings, and hopefully you end up getting more attention to baseball in Europe, because I think it's a big market that's never really even somewhat been explored yet. So
Yeah, it's really not, and it's something that the game really does need to help grow that younger and that fresh audience, which is something that they've really lacked for quite a while. But let's go ahead and move on, and let's move on to talking about the AL Central division leading Twins. They suffered a couple big injuries this week, with Carlos Correa being placed on the injured list today with a thumb injury. Doesn't sound like it's going to be a very serious thing. They backdated it until the 6th. There was thought that he might be able to avoid it, but they're just giving him the couple extra days. He should be back as soon as it's up, as soon as the days are up, or really close to that. But the bigger blow is going to be Chris Paddock, who exited his start in the third inning earlier this week, and it's being said now that he has elbow inflammation, and it's looking like a second Tommy John surgery is possible.
yeah, so to start off with Chris Paddock, that really is a shame, because after that trade from San Diego to Minnesota, he had started off very very nicely in Minnesota. His ERA at a 4.03 is just okay, not the worst, but it's not great. But I mean, his peripherals were looking really, 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 really good in Minnesota to start this year. So really a shame to see him get injured. This is a guy too that San Diego had really, really, really babied his way up. I remember there was all that controversy about his innings limits a couple years ago, and not letting him throw um, full workloads, and I think some ways that can be a two-edged sword, because now you got a guy who has never really thrown a full starter's workload, trying to throw starter's workloads and getting injured. But I think it's a shame that he's injured. You really hate seeing that for a guy that's got finally looked like he was starting to figure it out a little bit. And then for Carlos Correa, he had been off to such a slow start. It was real disappointing, um, but obviously he's not going to be out for too long, which is a really good thing. Um, one little silver lining to the Correa injury was that they were able to call up Royce Lewis and give him his first cup of coffee in the big leagues, former number one overall pick. He had been mashing in AAA to start the year. After 2 years of not playing. 2020 we had the pandemic, and last year he dealt with an injury all year. But he had looked really good in AAA, and they were able to get him his first look in the big leagues, which is really cool. And he's been pretty. He's had a pretty good start. I mean, he's 3 for 10 to start his career. So. Gotten a few hits, gotten that taste of the big leagues, so that's pretty neat for him. But kind of a note there. But I expect Correa to be back pretty soon, and I think the plan is for them to send Royce Lewis back down to AAA to keep working on his game um, when when Correa comes back, and not to stick around in a different position or something. So, but definitely a cool thing to see.
Yeah, it really is. And just, looking at the way, even though Correa has started off slow, if you look at his, exit velocities and the hard hit rate, top 10% in the league. So that'll come around. And maybe this thumb injury and getting him on the IL is just a couple extra days to let him kind of just reset after struggling and coming back strong that way. Paddock really does hurt because he was a lot better than, he's probably better than what people would think, even though I'm not a big fan of his. Um, but the changes he had made when he went over to Minnesota, it had showed, that there was still something there, even though the results didn't fully back it up. Um, but it's, losing the starter on that rotation where they were already down for Sonny Gray. I'm not even sure if Gray's back yet or not. I think he is.
Yeah, he is.
So he is, but that rotation is so fragile. It's so thin already. And losing a guy like Paddock, who you expected to be a big part of that rotation moving forward and out for, if he does have to have the Tommy John, which is his second of his career, it's going to be it's going to be a big hurt. And they say the second one's usually a little bit easier than the first, but you never know.
Yeah.
But the next one we wanted to jump over to was the St. Louis Cardinals made the decision today to option former All-Star Paul DeJong to AAA.
Yeah, this was an interesting move. It really sucks for Paul DeJong. Um, he had that one really good year, but I mean, at the end of the day, you can't produce at the plate. It's been we're going on 3 years now of subpar production at the plate. His defense is still good, but maybe they probably feel like they could maybe still get something out of him if he could go figure out a swing at AAA. Um, the projection system still like him, and he also ran a 173 batting average on balls at play this year too, so far, which is pretty low. But a guy who in 2019 was a 30 home run hitter. A obviously that was juice ball, but 3.7 WAR in 2019. Great defender, and you think that maybe he can go figure something out with the bat and come back a little bit stronger. A guy who's not going to hit for a guy he doesn't walk an awful lot. 8% is not awful, but 29% strikeout rate to start the year, and then that batting average on balls in play being so low, um, you know, probably doesn't help. That might be a little bit of luck, but that's kind of been the norm for him too. The last couple of years he's been sustaining a low BABIP. So, last year was still a solid player, a 1.4 WAR last year. So maybe he can figure it out, but I kind of doubt we're going to see it, especially with Edmundo Sosa about to come back up, and the Cardinals seem to really like him. So,
Yeah, the Edmundo Sosa had supplanted Paul DeJong last year at shortstop for the majority of the playing time. It is going to be weird seeing where they go. Who's going to be the majority of the shortstop time there, because it was either DeJong or Sosa. One would say maybe Tommy Edman, but then who plays second? Right now it was Nolan Gorman. They're not calling him up, and Sosa was kind of the backup there as well. So it'll be weird to see how they divvy up the playing time that way. Once maybe if they do get DeJong back in a month or so, if he can refine his swing there. But it is a little weird, but at the end of the day, you mentioned it's been 3 years since he did anything remotely close to league average as a hitter, and that's just not going to fly these days. The days of being pretty a solid defender and nothing at the plate, kind of just we're taking the approach away from that. It seems like so. But who knows? I mean, he's still young enough to where he can find something there and come back and have
Yeah.
some solid years left.
I'm honestly shocked he's still at option, an ability to be optioned.
Yeah,
So
there that is true. But we wanted to highlight some games and some specific performances this last week that have happened. And one of the big ones that we wanted to start with was Rowdy Tellez in a 18-4 win for the Milwaukee Brewers over the Cincinnati Reds. He ended up having 2 homers and 8 RBIs.
yeah, Rowdy Tellez is off to a really good start this year. We kind of mentioned it a little bit last week, but you know, he has just been crushing the ball. He's already got 7 home runs on the season. In just 29 games, 105 plate appearances. He's if you look at his baseball savant page, it's basically all Reds, which is really good. And then this is just a guy that you've always seen a little bit of potential there with the bat. He's a big guy. He's got a pretty good swing. Hits lefty, can hit righties real well. But you just kind of got really good power. But you just kind of haven't seen him take off yet. And this year he's shown signs of maybe being able to do that. Definitely would like to see him be able to get up his walk rate a little bit, being that kind of power first baseman. But he's put up a 147 WRC plus so far this year, which is really solid. A .6 WAR already. You know, and this year having a 567 slugging percentage seems to be pretty difficult. So, it's been a good start for him, and that game just kind of highlights it. I mean, just the Brewers in general too they haven't been great offensively, but they've been way better than they were kind of expected to be. And Rowdy Tellez and that 18-4 win, even though it was the Reds, kind of highlights that. So definitely a good thing to see from Rowdy Tellez, and we'll see if he can continue that for a while.
Yeah, I remember when Rowdy Tellez was drafted, and they were talking about how when he can find it, he can be one of the best hitters in the game. And it's taken him some time, and a couple different spots, be it starting in Toronto, and had some decent years there, and then getting flipped to Milwaukee last year, and then what you've seen so far this year, he's basically seemed like that hitter that people thought he could be at one time. And he's not your prototypical like platoon guy. Like he hits lefties pretty decent in his career. He's struggling a little bit this year, but for a big lefty power bat, most of the times you see that they're only good against righties, and he's been doing a pretty decent job against both sides throughout his career. So hopefully he gets some more playing time. We see this keep up. But another one of the big games we wanted to mention was Josh Naylor had 2 homers and 8 RBIs and leading a comeback win for the Cleveland Guardians over the Chicago White Sox yesterday.
Yeah, so that was a what a game for Naylor. I was actually watching that game. I was about to go to bed, and it was the game of the day on MLB Network or whatever. So I had it on in the background, and I kind of laid down to go to sleep, and still had it on, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna just watch the end of it. It's the 9th inning. It's a 6-run game. Just whatever. Might see something cool. And then something crazy happened in that Josh Naylor and the Indians, or the Guardians, excuse me, came all the way back from six runs down and capped it off with a Josh Naylor grand slam to tie the game. This was after a couple errors, by the way, by Tim Anderson, who now has 8 errors on the season already, which is pretty remarkable. But Josh Naylor hit the grand slam to tie the game, and then I did fall asleep because I had to work this morning. I had to turn it off and go to bed. But I've come back this morning, look at it, and Josh Naylor, of course, hit another home run to go ahead in extra innings in the 11th inning, a 3-run homer. So 8 RBIs on the game for him. Just a few talking points off that game. That game was kind of a microcosm of the White Sox season. Just they had it in the bag. They looked really good. They were the better team. They had good contributions from their starter did well. We'll talk about him a little bit later. A little bit of a spoiler there, but um, their and their bullpen was pretty good for the most part. and then they completely lost all of their focus in the ninth inning, and they made two or three errors and or two bad errors, and then just couldn't get it together. I mean, you saw Liam Hendricks come in there and walk a couple guys, give up a couple hits, and then Liam Hendricks giving up a grand slam is not typical. And then of course for Cleveland, they've been sneaky good this year so far. Their record's not great, but they've been kind of decent. Um, so I definitely think it's definitely an interesting game, and I like what I've seen from Josh Naylor this year too. A 181 WRC plus is really good. He's a really weird player. He doesn't strike out, doesn't walk a lot. But he's also kind of a lefty power bat, which that's kind of a weird profile. Lefty power bat that doesn't strike out much, doesn't walk much. He plays first base, but he's short, and he probably should play outfield, but he's not fast enough. He's not a good enough athlete to play outfield. He's kind of probably should be a DH really, but of course Cleveland's got a few DHs, so. But definitely an interesting player and having an interesting season. And that game last night was wild.
Yeah, and I think what makes it even a better story so far is this, not only the success he's having this year, with the 338 average, 374 or 370 on base, and a 574 slugging with a 944 OPS, is that he's doing this coming back after basically getting his ankles shattered in a play with his teammate where they collided in the outfield and he landed weird and it broke his ankle. And I think that's part of the reason why they have him playing first base now too, is to help limit some stress on that. But he's been really good, and he had shown little flashes of this before, but never the consistency to put it up. And it is still a small sample. He still only has 73 plate appearances, but it has been pretty cool to see Josh Naylor. One of the guys who was a former first overall pick or first round draft pick, number 12 overall. Starting to hit that breakout at age 24. And that game was wild. Like you don't hardly ever see Liam Hendricks give up, game tying grand slams, and just the White Sox in general. Speaking of the how bad defensively they were, did you see what their the White Sox broadcaster did when
Oh,
Gavin Sheets made the error?
oh yeah, I heard it.
Yeah, he dropped the ball easy, and he's the White Sox broadcaster was like, "Are you shitting me?" Like, oh, you never see broadcast do that. It was
Yeah,
hilarious.
yeah.
But
But one more note on that trade or that on Josh Naylor is that trade is looking really bad for San Diego. Uh, I mean, they gave up Josh Naylor, who obviously is looking pretty decent and definitely looks like an everyday player at the big league level. Austin Hedges is, kind of a defense first kind of backup slash he can start if you really need him to catcher. But Cal Quantrill's been a pretty decent big leaguer. They also gave up Gabriel Arias, who's been in the big league some, and Owen Miller, who's having a little bit of a breakout, even though I don't think he's going to sustain it. So it's pretty crazy that they gave up all that for Clevenger, who's pitched. I believe he pitched. That's another news story we haven't really talked about. I think he pitched his first game with the Padres this week. So
against the
uh,
Guardians.
yeah, so definitely interesting there. But yeah, I mean that's kind of one of those things like um, that's been a really bad trade for San Diego, who has been known to have some bad trades in the past few years. So
Yeah, I think we ran down the other day, or maybe it was a couple weeks ago in our group chat, the trades that they've made, and
yeah,
you could make basically an all-star team of the players they've traded
yeah,
away.
Trey
But
Turner, Max Fried,
yeah,
Josh
the
Naylor,
the list goes on.
Ty France,
Yeah,
and I mean the guys they've traded them for have. I mean, some of them have had some success, but they haven't all had success. I mean, it's like Austin Nola. He's been okay, but is he as good as Ty France? No.
no,
Like, I mean, you look at Max Fried. Justin Upton was there for like 1 year, and he was just okay. Max Fried's looking like a potential ace right now, and has been for the last 3 or 4 years. You look at and then this trade starting to look pretty bad. I mean, you're looking at a guy who looks pretty good at first base for Cleveland and Josh Naylor, and San Diego's gotten what one start out of the guy they got for him. So we're definitely getting into AJ Preller is it's interesting for sure.
He deserves a lifetime contract. But let's jump to another game, and we talk about this guy a lot, but he just continues to do things that make us want to talk about him, and it's Shohei Ohtani. He had a 3-4 game yesterday in a big win against Tampa Bay, 2 homers, one being a grand slam. Went back to back with Mike Trout, and then on the mound this week as well, he had another amazing performance.
Yeah, so Shohei Ohtani, I was more impressed by his what he did on the mound this week. I was watching that game, and I mean, it wasn't. I think it was the best he's ever looked in his career. I mean, he was untouchable. He wasn't. He was throwing everything for strikes. I mean, his stuff was just insanely good. He had 7 innings, like something like 11 or 12 strikeouts again, no walks. Anything that has been a bugaboo for him in the past, like his control a little bit, it wasn't an issue for him, and hasn't been as much of an issue this year. He just keeps getting better on the mound. And the other day was just a prime example of that. And then, of course, I mean, he comes in last night, and you know, we've talked about him some, and it's very special to get to watch the Angels right now because I don't know how good the team is because of the depth and stuff. They look pretty good so far. We'll see if they keep it up. They really need their pitching to hold together. They need their and they need their they need their rest of their depth in their lineup to hold together too because we'll see if Taylor Ward can keep it up. I mean, we'll see if Brandon Marsh can keep it up. That some of these guys are, we're just gonna have to wait and see. But the fact that we're able to watch Ohtani and Trout hit back to back is incredible, and back to back home runs. I think it's the first time that's happened for those two guys together, and that's something truly special to watch the two best players in the game, playing on the same team and being able to do that. I try to every time that I get a chance to watch the Angels, I try to watch them, and it's a shame that they're not on national broadcasts more and featured more on stuff because they haven't been good. Which I understand not featuring them as much because I mean their record's been not good the last few years, but I'm just hoping that they're able to sustain what they've started off this year because I mean I would love that would be so good for the game to get to or for people a general audience to get to watch these two guys play in meaningful games at the end of the season, rather than just have a back to back against the I don't even remember who they were playing, but on a Monday night in May. So definitely love watching that, and you know, two guys who are just special players.
Yeah, and to see those two at the top of their game, that's what's really fun here. And then seeing the Angels be as good as the Angels are right now, and hopefully that they're able to keep it up because that team and Mike Trout needs to get into the playoffs. Um, and they have all the talent. If Syndergaard's able to do it, keep it up. If Rendon's able to stay healthy, you get Ohtani and Trout. You've seen guys like Taylor Ward break out. Like that team is really fun, and it's going to be fun to watch them throughout the year. But from a team that's really fun to watch to a team that is not so fun to watch, if you are a fan of the Philadelphia Phillies and what they did this week against the New York Mets, having a 7-0 lead and then ended up losing 8-7.
Yeah, I was watching that game on Thursday night as well, and that was the perfect example of the Philadelphia Phillies from the last 3 or 4 years. They look good. They build up a good lead. They have a good outing from their starting pitcher. I think Nola was pitching that game and pitched like 6 or 7 innings of shutout ball, and they get to the ninth inning and the bullpen implodes. I mean, it's a carbon copy every year, and it was just your typical Phillies implosion. I mean, they didn't play very good defense. Their pitchers were not good. They walked guys. I mean, I just that's one of my biggest pet peeves is watching somebody walk a guy with a 6-run lead in the ninth inning. I mean, just throw a meatball down the middle. You could have a position player out there, they probably wouldn't give up 6 runs in the ninth inning. Um, it's just one of those things that um, I mean, it's hard to believe that it just continues to happen, and the fact that they haven't really invested in that bullpen. I know they brought in Corey Knebel this year, but I mean, the Corey Knebel is only so much. I mean, you look around the big leagues and teams that made investments. I mean, the Dodgers went out and traded for Craig Kimbrell. I mean, the Phillies couldn't have done that. I mean, the Dodgers gave up a decent major leaguer, but it wasn't like they gave up a lot of surplus value in that deal because Pollock's contract is probably about what Pollock's worth. And then you got, Kenley Jansen was a free agent. The Phillies not have tried to sign Kenley Jansen. They could have probably overpaid him a little bit, gotten him over Atlanta. I mean, it's just one of those things that it's hard to believe that they still haven't been able to figure out the bullpen. And the Phillies are starting to get to um, they're starting to get to a position where some of their players are starting to age a little bit, and they're going to have some question marks here going forward. Um, a lot of their prime players, Bryce Harper's in his prime right now. They're going to waste it because of just not being able to put the final pieces together on a team. And of course the Mets, you know, it's just kind of been like the Mets season this year too. I mean, it's been, get a little, have a couple of the other team makes a couple mistakes and have a couple of balls that weren't hit all that hard fall, and just keep pounding away, and they're making it happen right now. They look really, um, they really kind of have the it factor about them right now that is they're having a really good season, and I don't think they're going to keep up the pace they're on now. I mean, they have had a lot of good fortune, but at the same time, I think they are a really good team, and they're going to be really difficult for anybody to catch. And I mean, if they can get fully healthy, with DeGrom coming back, or having all their pitchers be 100%, they're going to be really, really, really tough. So we'll see what ends up happening. But definitely a fun game to watch. I mean, it's kind of one of those things where baseball never ceases to amaze you. We've had two games in the last week that was 6-0 in the in the final inning, and ends up being a going the other way. I mean, there's how many times do you see blowout games just get flipped like that? It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it is pretty wild, especially when you see a major league team blow a 7-run lead. It's it's very rare, but that's why I don't understand when people are like, well, you can't try and bunt for a hit when you're up 7-0, or you don't swing 3-0 when you're up 7-0. It's like, dude, baseball doesn't have a clock. You never know when the other team is going to put together a rally and be able to pull it off.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been wild. I think that's part of the problems we've seen with Philly the past couple of years, the bullpen and the defense just being so bad that it's leading to them not being the team that many think they should be. And the Mets have looked really good, especially even without DeGrom. There's probably some aggression gonna happen there, but it's pretty fun what they've been doing so far to watch. At least from outside the division. I don't know if it's too much or not that fun watching from the inside the division as a Braves fan, but overall, I mean, it's been a pretty fun year to watch the Mets and what they've been doing, and games like this just kind of show that. But basically that's going to wrap up for the main part of the show, and then we're going to jump over to Players of the Week and wrap this thing up pretty soon. But who do you got for your hitter this week?
So my hitter this week, I picked Jose Altuve, and Jose Altuve battled some injury to start the season this year, but he was looking a little bit not great. But for the past 7 days, he's really kind of figured it out. 474 average, 565 own base, 947 slugging. He's at 3 home runs. He's only played 6 games. They had an off day, and put up .7 WAR, which was tied for third in the big leagues over the last 7 days. And obviously, with playing the one fewer game, that's a big deal too. But on the season, Jose Altuve, he's starting to look really good. He's kind of been himself. His numbers have come up. He's had he's got a 156 WRC plus. He's hit 262, which is a little low for him because the BABIP is low. A 273 BABIP for a guy whose career average is at 328 on BABIP. But he's also, he's walking a lot, 15% walk rate, which is astronomically higher than any other season he's ever had. And I don't think he'll sustain a 15% walk rate, but he's not striking out a ton, maybe a little more than last year. But he's been a great player for them this year, and we'll see if he can keep it up. It's been a nice season for him, a good bounce back from the beginning of the year, where first week or two people were talking about him being cooked, and I was like, it's pretty small sample size, and sure enough, here we come. And in his age 32 season, he's looking like one of the better players in baseball still.
Yeah, it's been a really good week for Jose Altuve, and mentioned he struggled to begin with the season, but he's really bounced back, and the Astros really did need him to bounce back. He's kind of the person that leads that team as he goes, they go. So they really needed him to be good, and he's showing back that he's to that level again. But for my hitter this week, I ended up going with a guy who doesn't usually have weeks like that, and it's Manuel Margot. If you look, he was the second best offensive player, tied with Manny Machado this week. 478 average, a 520 on base, a 957 slugging, a 341 WRC plus, and had 3 home runs this week for a guy whose career major league high is 12 in his career. To have 3 this week, and 11 RBIs, 4 stolen bases. It was a pretty fun week for Manuel Margot, from a guy who isn't really a superstar player, and just had one of those hot weeks. I feel like he deserved to be mentioned a little bit.
Yeah, Manuel Margot definitely interesting, and I just wanted to point out here that you remember when the Rays traded Austin Meadows and re-signed Manuel Margot, and everyone's asking what the hell are they doing? Well, Manuel Margot has a 175 WRC plus, and Austin Meadows is hurt again. So it, the Rays just keep on winning those types of deals. I mean, it's pretty remarkable. But moving on to the pitcher of the week for me, I always try to. I would have gone with Shohei, but we've talked about him all the time, which I guess we just talked about him a minute ago. But I also, I kind of have to. I also like to go with some 2-start guys, and one 2-start guy that caught my eye was Michael Kopech. He made 2 starts this week, didn't give up a run. He only pitched 10 innings. He's not going to be a high innings guy, especially right now as he's kind of transitioning from mostly having been in a bullpen role to going into more of a starter role this year. But 10 innings. He's given up. He gave up 0 runs, 10 strikeouts per 9. So I think that's 11 strikeouts. Um, and a few walks, but nothing too bad. I think 4 walks in 10 innings. But definitely a guy who he's been really good for the White Sox this year. I worry a little bit about him being able to get the ball on the ground. He's got a 30% ground ball rate, which is pretty low. Um, he hasn't given up a home run yet. You would expect that to change with that ground ball rate being so low. He's getting a lot of fly balls. Eventually, one of them's going to leave the yard. But 246 FIP, which is really good. Obviously his ERA at an 0.93 is incredible. His fastball velocity is a lot lower than I would expect from him. Surprisingly, it's under 96 miles an hour, which is obviously still really good at 95.8. But last year he started 97, most of that coming out of the bullpen, but still. But yeah, I mean, Kopech's been really good, and the White Sox have really needed it with the injuries they have in that pitching rotation. I mean, Lance Lynn being out for a while, and Giolito's spent some time not being fully healthy, and they also lost Carlos Rodon off of last year's team. So this is a team that really needed Kopech to come in and step up as a starter, along with Dylan Cease, having his real breakout last year probably, but really being good so far this year. Kopech's kind of been another guy for them, and it's a shame that the White Sox can't play behind him and decided to blow a 6-run lead in the game he pitched last night. So
Yeah, Kopech is one of my favorite players, pitchers to watch at least. I remember when he came up his rookie year, was a fireballer. I tried everything I could to try to trade for him, and I wasn't able to do it in my fantasy league. But Kopech is one of those guys who has the special talent. He has that special mix if he's able to stay healthy, to be one of the upper echelon starters in the league. And I think you're finally starting to see this now that he's getting his shot back in the rotation. A guy who they put in the bullpen the last couple of years, to try and keep that arm healthy, kind of build him up a little bit. And he's back to kind of having the reins off, and he's shown what he can do. And he's pretty special and pretty fun to watch when he does that. But my pitcher this week that I went with is Merrill Kelly from the Arizona Diamondbacks. It was only a 1 start this week, but I was actually watching this game and I was pretty impressed with what he was doing. 8 2/3 innings of shutout baseball. Of what he did. He did leave with runners on first and second and gave up The bullpen gave up one of the runs there, but he was just super efficient. 8 strikeouts there, but I think he went into the ninth inning at like 85 or 90 pitches or something. And he kind of ballooned there in the end. That's why he ended up getting pulled. But was just one of the guys who has been very underrated this year. I believe we were looking before the show, and he's like the 3rd ranked pitcher so far in WAR this year, in all of baseball. And nobody's really talking about him. Nobody's even really hearing about him. So I felt he deserved to get a little recognition after that game, and then for sort of his season he's been having so far as well.
Yeah, Merrill Kelly's been great this year, and it's been pretty interesting for him. A guy who I think he had pitched in Korea some, and then he came over, to play in the big leagues, and Arizona signed him, and he's been okay at times in his career so far, but with the larger sample size seasons, he only pitched in 5 games in 2020. Was really good in his 5 starts that year, but he's been kind of a mid-4s ERA guy. This year he's just taken off so far. He's striking out more guys than he has ever struck out. Honestly, the profile is not that much different. He's just a little bit better in every facet. Striking out a few more, walking a few less, and getting the ball on the ground just a little bit more. And he's been really good. I mean, a 205 FIP, a 122 ERA. Those numbers are incredible. His expected numbers are still good. I mean, his expected FIP and expected ERA are both around a 3.3, which is really good. And obviously Merrill Kelly's a guy. It'll be interesting to see what happens with him because he's 33 years old, and if he keeps this up, he might be a really, really intriguing player for the Diamondbacks to look at maybe sending at the trade deadline because he's under control through 2025, but he's also, he's 33 years old, so you don't know if he's going to fit their window, and you can you could definitely you could definitely decline that. He's got a 2025 club option, so you're probably under control. I think 2 more years after 2022 ends, and it's a 2-year, 18 million is what it is at that point. So definitely a guy who it'll be interesting to see what happens with him. But the start for him has been great, and we'll see. He could be a pretty valuable piece for the Diamondbacks to either hold on to in case they decide to contend next year, which I kind of doubt, or to move at the deadline if he continues to keep this pace up.
Yeah, he really can be. And the Diamondbacks kind of can use that to flip at the deadline or moving forward to help their rebuild out, and somebody can get a pretty solid pitcher because I think he could be a low 3, probably high 4 in a decent rotation and be an innings eater for a lot of people. So will be interesting to see what they do moving forward. But you got anything else you want to wrap up on?
I don't really think so. Excited to see what happens here in the coming weeks. The weather's starting to heat up around the country a little bit. We'll see if that helps maybe with some of the fly ball issues we've had. Um, I think there's been a lot of talk about that lately about home runs and fly balls dying out and everything. And we'll see if they end up having some more. Maybe the weather heating up will help with that a little bit. But we'll see. And I think these early season, kind of getting into May games, they're important. I mean, you got a lot of players who have had hot starts who they start to kind of struggle this time of year. They could really fall off a cliff. You got some players who started really slow. They get hot right now. They can kind of continue that and salvage a really good season. So, but you're kind of getting to the point where you're kind of telling who some of the better teams are, some of the worst teams, and your sample size is getting just a little bit bigger. So definitely going to be interesting to see here in the next few weeks. It's a kind of important time of the year here the next 2 or 3 weeks for every team to kind of establish where they're going to be kind of going into that summer. So I definitely am interested to see what happens, and we'll move on to some more games this week, and it'll be great. Just a good season so far.
Yeah, it's been a really fun season so far. Hopefully, we have a couple more talking points that we can get to this next week or so. Um, feel like we've been kind of lacking, just kind of throwing some stuff together just to make episodes happen. So hopefully some real fun stuff happens this week that we can get to talk about. And moving forward, we know we're going to start hitting that push for start talking about all-star game ballots here in about a month or so, and then going into the whole trade deadline in the middle of July and stuff. But been fun so far, and be bringing it to you weekly. So thank you guys for tuning into this episode of the Bat Flip Podcast, and we'll catch you guys next week.